Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright, and sunny day. It is Tuesday, the 27th of August, and I'm in the reading up with a nice hot cup of tea and a box to continue unboxing. And what? Yeah, well, I've already done an unboxing of that. So the next thing will be this Return to Dark Tower, the fantasy role playing game published by Ninth Level Games. A new evil has taken the Dark Tower. Will you rise to the fight against this adversary and become a hero of the Four Kingdoms? Over the course of a campaign of quests and marches, you will fight fiendish monsters, raise allied armies, and unearth ancient lore until you can marshal your forces to lay siege to the adversary and the Dark Tower itself. A thoroughly modern role-playing game based upon the exciting board game Return to Dark Tower, powered by Polymorph and compatible with the award-winning Mazes fantasy role-playing. 2 to 6 players, age 30 and up, if you're brave enough. Powered by Polymorph. So, the cover. The cover is taken from the board game Return to Dark Tower, published by Restoration Games, because Restoration is what that company does. And what it did was take the board game, MB board game, Dark Tower from the early 80s, one of the first kind of electronic games where you were playing against the game itself, so a very early sort of like cooperative game, in an attempt to essentially defeat a Sauron-like evil wizard adversary type figure. And they brought out a whole new version of the game, give it a huge upgrade, put it into a huge box, and really turned it into kind of an event kind of game. But Ninth Level Games got a license to create a role-playing game based upon it, so you can actually visit this world and role-play in it rather than just necessarily play the board game. So you open up and you have this, and there is first thing is I'll show you that properly. You've got a map which I will show you. You've got a map of the Four Kingdoms, essentially a replication of the board for the role-playing game. Sorry, for the board game, I should say. Replicated for the role-playing game. And then we are into credits page, an introduction, and the contents page. This is a proper actual introduction. You've got a forward before then, explaining what this is, basic gameplay, who the adversary is, and the nature of the heroes and companions. And describing how a game session consists of quest, tally, and march. So quest is essentially the core traditional role-playing session. Tally phase is the inventory of resources and replaces the traditional fantasy treasure hoarding and shopping stages. I think some players might be disappointed because they do like to take their play characters shopping. And the march phase essentially is when they wrap up the session, including decisions about what they're going to do in the next session. So it's quite programmed a little bit. It's all structured. And eventually, the player characters will need laid siege to the tower, or the adversary will break their final seals and unleash their wrath upon the Four Kingdoms. And the final session will result in a battle game where the two sides clash. That's the final battle that will signal the end of the campaign. And here we get into the mechanics with one die to rule them all, each player character having kind of choosing a particular die which is key to their character. And we move on to all about role-playing. So fantasy role-playing, what it's all about. Is this Dungeons & Dragons or what is fantasy role-play? And so on. You've got a guide to that, including, telling a story together, playing the game to find out what happens, ruling over rules, what should a game look like. So in many cases, these would be, if you take your typical kind of role playing that talks about in this with this kind of language, tends to be smaller, tighter, comes more as a digest size book than this. This is a bit more open in its presentation, gives room for the art. Then we explains what the mazes of role playing game is, how to reuse resources in the game, and then what you actually need to play. And so that's quite a short section on role playing. Then we move on to the game world. So, history of the Dark Tower, world of the Four Kingdoms. How to make the Dark Tower your own. Essentially, this is essentially the game master making the Dark Tower her own, but preparing everything, and then before play, starting with a session 0 and defining the adversary. And then we get proper sort of like full discussion of the game mechanics. So your role is your role. So you've got 4 roles: Paragon, Vanguard, Fighter, and Sentinel, and these are each defined by a different die type. And essentially, you've got 3 different types of role with the dice RO, LL. So action roll, save roll, effect roll, and you can see sort of like there the effects. Essentially, what those are the numbers that are going to be rolled to trigger an effect. Save and the effect. Having advantage, and if all else fails, just do it. But resolving dice rolls, including books, boots, blades, and bones, which are the core key kind of elements. So you roll books when you're testing knowledge and perception and mental powers. Boots when you're testing physical movement. Blades when you do combat. Bones is healing. You've got the banner and reinforces protective elements. There's always going to be room for chaos. And these actions can be personal, but they can also be scaled up. Resources. The rolling dice versus spending resources, and then I'll have essentially a sheet there where they have room for both. Moments where essentially events happen, and then how to spend each of the resources. So starting with spirit, evil, treasure, so on. Dealing with danger, refreshing scenes. There's always the danger of corruption as well. You've got a full list here of the possible corruptions that might occur over the course of the campaign. But the player characters will have strength of bonds between themselves, perhaps between an NPC with an NPC as well. Then we have guidelines for making characters. So that explains what a hero is, what a companion is. So basically, each player also makes a companion as well as a hero, and then he was also the leader of a force of allies, soldiers, outlaws, thieves, wizards, or perhaps something strange or unique. And we're explaining what the character types are. So we've got the Paragon, Vanguard, the Fighter, Sentinel. And then the different sort of aspects is essentially of how a character approaches issues. So that can be sword aspect, shadow aspect, sorcery aspect, and then we actually have classes. Essentially, how the classes explains how they work. A quick guide there to using Return to Dark Tower in the mazes system, canyons, and then actually, finally we get on to the point is having discussed characters, is how you create a character. So this asks questions like, where does the character come from? Map, and then details of those locations, so on. Role do you want to play? How do you solve the problems? Who are you in the Four Kingdoms and so on? Which class do you favour? And who are your forces? So the elements there, essentially, the choices that player is going to make in creating his character, and of course, why does the character want to defeat the adversary? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this up so you can actually see. Blocks a little bit of the light. So where are we making characters? Who are your forces? So these are the ones you're going to assemble and take around the map, capturing locations and so on. What do you look like, and what the character's name is, and then we have sample sheets, class and edge descriptions. So this includes the Relic Hunter, Reverend Astromancer, Doer Arkwright, Haunted Recluse, Relentless Warden. So this is lots of options here, so that you could actually play this multiple times. The Lightning Arbalaster, the Brutal Warlord, Spiderweb Assassin. Some really interesting and options here. Accompanied by really sort of nice artwork. Here we've got a Boon Companion, and followed by edges, flesh out further aspects of the character. Move on to spellcasters and spellbooks. Ghost of Magic in the Four Kingdoms, and also using magic from mazes. Now, I've done unboxing of mazes as well. We'll move on to the spell books, including Psalms, Sunlit Death's Door, Canon or the Burning Exorcism, or Canon of the Burning Exorcism, Algebra of the Starlight Conjunctions. So these actually give several spells. So, for example, Canon of the Burning Exorcism, Sword of Flame, Benediction for the Zealous, Blazing Coat of Many Colors, Angelic Flame, and Ritual of the Final Expulsion. Actually, surprisingly, limited number of spell books here. Only counting 3. And then we've got a guide to game sessions, top ticks. So session phases, quest phase, planning these, and the tally phase. sorry, pages getting stuck together. It's quite thick paper. And then the details of the final battle against the adversary. She's got sort of like a clock there. It's going to be filled in. How to be the adversary. In the Dark Tower, you've got the adversary sheet. Guide on how to create the adversary. Other hazards that might be encountered in the Four Kingdoms. It says everything here is player facing, so thus players will roll to attack and also roll to avoid being attacked, that sort of thing. Other mechanics using clocks and seals and secrets, claiming and spending darkness created during the course of play, and the advantages of rising darkness. Gained from hazard use, advancing hazard use. So, it's terrible. The adversary can be terrible or neutral or resistant or undead. Adversary and foe descriptions. Portfolio of fiends and foes here. These come with secrets and seals. Some key elements on each. There we go. So the campaign can be played more than once because you've got multiple different adversaries. It can be different each time, different characters, different threats, different adversaries. It's not necessarily a one and done campaign. And they've got the more traditional kind of monsters like Kingdom Dragon, Frost Troll. Others. And advice for the adversary, running the game well. Here we've got the advice on being the adversary, balancing the enemy, the storyteller, emulating the tales of high adventure, telling a story together. Follow the advice there. Yeah, the door to adventure. We start at the door adventure. But before we get there, safety tools. Perhaps I would have liked those to be a bit further forward into the book at the start, but they are nevertheless welcome. And then we've got the appendix, the epilogue, the author talking about his experiences with Dark Tower, and those sheets, character sheets, reprinted again for the benefit group and the game master. So that is Return to Dark Tower Fantasy Roleplaying, published by 9th Level Games. Well, I hope you enjoyed this unboxing. If you did, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be able to get more unboxings of the Nook, we'll see me out here with a box containing a book or game or role-playing supplement, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.